So a little bit about Zach. Zach has been an iOS developer for over a decade at different types of companies. He's also a mentor for Underdog Devs. We highly recommend looking them up. In his spare time, he's a dancer and a dance instructor and competes in the occasional fun competition. So please, everyone, welcome Zach. I'm going to pass the control to him. And yeah, we're really excited about this meeting.
Hey, everyone. All right, so let's see. Here we go. Do the obligatory. Can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, we can see you.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you so much to Navati and Esmeralda for having me. My name is Zach Brass, and this is So You Just Got Laid Off. Now what? Couple of housekeeping notes. Like you said before, if we're going to be talking about a lot of tips and resources today, and there's way too many to cover in this talk. So along with any questions that you might have, if there's resources that you personally love, feel free to drop them in the Zoom chat. Also, because I'm here representing myself, I'm not here representing my employer, I'm putting up this slide. So Esmeralda gave me a little bit of an intro before, but I'm Zach Brass. I am an iOS developer living here in New York City. I've been doing iOS professionally for about 12 years at all different types of companies. In my spare time, I'm a swing dancer and dance instructor. And within the last year, I picked up a brand new hobby. I started competing in pun competitions. And I'm actually taking a 6-hour trip to Philly tomorrow just for a pun competition. So I'm like traveling there, spending a couple hours in Philly and traveling back just for this thing. So that's who I am, but who am I to give you this presentation time, this presentation? So story time. Well, actually more like vulnerability time. I've only ever told the full true story of this in public once before. Like I've told the euphemized version so many times that I almost started to believe it, but I've had to job search without a full-time job 3 different times in my career through different circumstances. First time happened in 2017. I was working for a company and I just straight up quit. It wasn't anything against the company. I was the only mobile dev at the company. And basically since college, I had wanted to transition from becoming an iOS dev to a product manager. And I thought, I'll take 3 months to focus on interviewing to become a product manager. And after 3 months, if that doesn't work, I'll go back to being an iOS dev and search for dev roles. Well, long story short, I spent a lot longer than 3 months on the product management search. Then I had to restart my job search looking for iOS roles this time. And in all, this job search took about a year. And when I got my next job, I decided, okay, no more quitting a job when you don't have a signed offer. Well, the next time it happened was 2019, and I had finally gotten a job as a product manager, and I lasted 3 months. I was applying the absolute wrong mindset, and they asked me to leave. And oh my God, I cried. I wasn't cut out for it. It was my own damn fault, but I was still upset. And so I had to, again, go back to being an iOS developer. So here I was again, stuck job hunting without a job. Now this job search took me about 2 months. The most recent time that I just finished up, which took me about 4.5 months, happened last year. I was a little over a year into my most recent role as an iOS developer at Facebook. I had a team on Instagram that I really enjoyed. We were doing really good work, and I was enjoying everyone. And I had been living in New York for about a year, and then they laid off 13% of the company. Well, crap. Here we go again. Here's some, before we get into some tips, here's some sort of grains of salt that you can sort of sprinkle on my presentation. While I have been through this before multiple times, I want to fully acknowledge that my experience will probably be different in some part, either because I'm a white dude or because I'm a US citizen living in the US. I don't know about non-US employment law regarding layoffs, and I've never had to worry about visa issues. It's just me. I'm not supporting a family financially. I'm a single income household. And also this is women who code mobile. So I'm not going to be talking about searching for a job as like a Node.js developer. I have spent my career doing iOS, so I'm going to focus on mobile stuff, and in a couple of cases, specifically iOS. There's a lot of stuff that is more generic to software engineering, but my career has been spent doing iOS. So all of this is to say that some of this advice may not apply to your specific scenario, but with all that being said, fasten your seatbelts. We all just got laid off. So let's talk about how things might go. So on a seemingly random day, you'll either get called into a meeting or you'll get this nice impersonal email at like 3 a.m. saying in very careful corporate speak, you're getting laid off. You may get the deal, the details of any potential severance deal. You may not, and you might be tempted to jump into action right away and start applying for jobs immediately. Tip number one is don't do that. You're gonna need time to process. Like, it's okay to like gather resources, like do any time sensitive stuff, like get stuff off your work laptop. And like, if you're really feeling up to it, you can post on social media to be like, hey, this is what happens, to start generating job leads. But really the main thing to do is feel feelings, like really feel feelings. I'll bet you weren't expecting this one, right? Assess your situation. Really check in with yourself. It is okay to cry. For some of my colleagues that were laid off, it was one of the most traumatic events that they've ever experienced in their life. For other people, it was Tuesday. It might have been a bad Tuesday, but not like a dissociate on a couch for hours Tuesday. And as you're feeling these feelings, full disclosure, the full brunt of them might not hit you till later, and that's okay. If this is a particularly traumatic event, you might experience what I like to call the random feelings generator. The random feelings generator is where you find yourself in a situation and you're like, oh my God, this really sucks. I should be taking this really hard right now, but for some reason I feel fine. But later, you might be like drinking a glass of water or brushing your teeth, and by the end of that glass of water, you're randomly sobbing. This is okay. This is normal. This is the random feelings generator. Focus on taking care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. You are not a robot. You are an incredibly complicated houseplant with emotions. Make sure you do things like shower, go outside, stay hydrated, get rest, and eat foods that make you feel good. That's a very specific phrasing, foods that make you feel good. So for some people, that might mean, I don't want to upset my tummy, so I'm going to eat a big salad. But for other people, that might mean, I want to eat a whole pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and that will make me feel good. Now, as you're having these feelings, you might have super fun thoughts like, oh, this means I suck, or, oh, I'm definitely a bad engineer, or no one's going to want to hire me. No, you're not a bad engineer. You don't suck. Well, maybe you suck, but like not because of this. Getting laid off is not a blemish on a record. The way that a lot of big corporate layoffs work is that your big evil company brings in a secret nebulous consulting firm to give your company plausible deniability, and your company just agrees to go with it so that they can say, hey, you know what? We didn't make the decision to lay you off. McKinsey did, or Bain, or BCG, or like whatever the consulting firm is. Tip number 2, you're not alone. Like really, you're not alone, and you're not the only one that's going through this or going through this right now. Now, this doesn't mean suck it up. It means that there are others that know how you feel, that you can ask for help, that you can commiserate with. In this past layoff period, I have been shocked to find out that some of the iOS devs that I respect most, that are heavy hitter, like quote unquote name brand names in the iOS development world, have gotten fired or have been asked to leave their jobs. Find other colleagues from your now former employer who were also laid off. Figure out if any private layoff groups are happening, like on Facebook, Slack, LinkedIn, or Discord. Find those groups. Beyond just not being alone, this will be absolutely key for shared knowledge of your questions, and it might provide some additional insights into things you hadn't thought of before, from visa questions to procedure for filing for unemployment, whether you can file for unemployment, to even salary negotiation techniques. Speaking of which, tip number 3 is figure out what you're owed. Know the terms of your severance. Are you getting money? If so, when? Is it a lump sum, or is it sprinkled over time? How much longer is your health insurance going to last? What's your deal with your retirement account, like your 401k, or your taxes? Is your company providing certain services to laid off employees, like resume help or like career counseling? And are some of these things promised predicated upon you signing something? Make sure before you sign anything that you read it. Those layoff groups that I just talked about can help get those questions answered more quickly, in case inevitably your former employer's HR department is too swamped to get back to you in a timely manner. For example, I found out through my layoff groups that a non-disparagement clauses were recently made unenforceable and illegal. 2 things that are especially important to understand if you're in the US are the WARN Act and COBRA. The WARN Act is the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. And this is a law in the US that prevents companies from basically dumping you on your ass without a safety net when they lay you off, and it applies to most tech layoffs. I think if you are more than a few employees in company size, the WARN Act applies. If it does apply, it means that your employer has to give you at least 60 days of notice before they actually terminate your employment. This number varies state by state. In New York, it's 90 days instead of 60 days. But in practice, this usually means that there's this limbo period, often called a notice period. That's sort of this gray area where you're cut off from internal resources, like on your layoff date, but you're still technically employed on paper and getting a paycheck and insurance normally. And your actual employment on paper terminates at the end of that notice period. The second thing is COBRA, and it sounds cooler than it actually is. COBRA is the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, and COBRA allows you to continue your former employer's health insurance plan for several months after termination of any kind, whether it's you were fired, you were laid off, or you just voluntarily quit. The catch is that you have to pay the full cost of the plan monthly. Normally, your employer will subsidize this if you're employed. But if you have to pay the full cost of the plan monthly, that gets expensive. Now, some companies will include a certain number of months of paid COBRA, or at least paid COBRA premiums in their severance packages. But again, read your severance agreement and figure out what you're entitled to. Tip number 4 is, if you're job searching when you don't have a full-time job, your full-time job becomes job searching. This phrasing is a mouthful, but it will allow you to set healthier boundaries. Would you voluntarily pull 12-hour days at your normal job? No? Then do not burn yourself out by overexerting yourself during your new quote unquote day job. Along the same lines, if it wasn't before, your home office is now your office. Make sure your setup suits your needs. This means like things like office chair, keyboard, trackpad or mouse, monitor, desk location, proximity to natural light, desk height, video conferencing setup, all need to suit your needs. Like even office decorations. Some of these, like your monitor, will affect your productivity. Some, like proximity to natural light, will affect your body, brain, and well-being. So for example, when I got laid off, my personal laptop was a 2015 MacBook Pro, and I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of video calls, a lot of Xcode, and doing a bunch of stuff in parallel. And a 7-year-old MacBook Pro wasn't going to cut it for iOS dev interviews, so I invested in a refurbished M1 Apple Silicon MacBook Pro. Just like a real job, you're going to have to talk about it like a lot. This part is going to get really annoying. You're going to get a lot of well-meaning sentiments like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How's your job search going? Insert previous employer didn't know what they were losing. Or like, oh, I have a friend looking for a software engineer, and then you do some digging and then you find out like it's a back-end engineer, like not your type of engineer. All of this might feel at best hollow and at worst patronizing, especially when it comes from someone not in engineering. And the only advice that I have here is just mentally prepare for it. Hey, you take vacations from work, right? Pretty much all of your interviews will be virtual. That means you can do them from anywhere. Plan for non-search stuff. One big mistake that I made in the past is to be in this weird like limbo mode of both vacation mode and work mode at the same time. And it didn't really allow me to focus on either one. When it's search time, it's search time. When you're off the clock, you're off the clock. And this doesn't have to be big elaborate vacations. It can be hangs with friends, working on side projects, or like finally learning Combine or Jetpack Compose. Tip number 5, front load your resume work. When you're developing a product normally, you don't just like jump in to start coding. You have to do some prep work, right? So we're not just gonna start applying to jobs. We have to prep our resume. Front load your resume work before you start applying for jobs so you can make it extra easy to apply to jobs quickly, right? Update your resume sooner rather than later when everything's fresh in your head, and get feedback on it early and often from multiple people, including your former coworkers who know your work best and can point out things that you might have left out in your like bullet points on your resume. You'd be really surprised at who is willing to help you, especially former colleagues. But don't just update your resume, update your LinkedIn, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, Indeed, Hire.com, whatever other hiring platforms you're getting with the exact same text as your resume. Lots of job search sites have these one-click apply buttons that just submit your profile. And it basically turns a job application process into like a 30-second task. You don't need that mental overhead of wondering if everything's up to date, if you're submitting the most up-to-date version of your information. If you update your resume, then immediately update your profiles. This is why you do it ahead of time. Also, make sure to have your resume stored, preferably in PDF format, somewhere that syncs across all of your devices. And now you can handle most job application tasks from wherever on whatever device. Tip number 6, with fewer companies hiring and more companies doing layoffs, you want to cast a wide net. You want to get a huge amount of application volume. And now you've just made it super easy for you, for yourself to do that very, very quickly. Set a target number of minimum job applications per day, just like you set metrics for products at work. set a minimum number of applications per day, assuming you don't have interviews. Mine is 5 per day. Though towards the beginning of my search, I tended to do more. Towards the end of my search, I tended to do less, especially on interview days. So where do you source them from? Where do you source these job applications? We just talked about getting all those job site profiles up to date. So use them. These 5 are by no means a suggested or exhaustive list, but these are some. There are some job search sites that target specific industries, or that like target startups, right? Like AngelList just rebranded to like Well-Found, I think. I've used them in the past to apply to startups and to find specifically startup jobs. You may want to augment these aggregator sites with one-off postings that you might find on social media like Twitter or Mastodon or Slack channels. I like using these because even though they're not sort of, a big bulk apply situation, if someone that isn't a recruiter is posting one-off about a job opening, chances are they like it there. Plus, then you get a referral and you have a higher chance of getting your resume seen. Apply to random jobs and take random interviews. Don't be judicious about who you're applying to. I'm a firm believer that you do not have to be passionate about a company or a space before you apply for a job there. Like, you can get passionate about a space that you know nothing about. I've done it. Apply for companies you know nothing about and take those random interviews. This will help you in 2 ways. First way is it will help you get your reps in, just like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This is especially important towards the beginning of your search to shake off the cobwebs, sort of know what types of interviews you'll get nowadays or since your last job search round. It's better to screw up in an interview with a company that you're not as interested in and learn from it than screw up when there's a company that you really care about and the stakes are higher. Like, you want to use this opportunity to get reps in to figure out where your strengths are and your weaknesses are. Like, is there a company that's hiring but you never work for? Awesome. Apply anyway. Use it to get your reps in, to get that interview practice in. The second reason you want to apply to random places is that you might find a hidden gem. This happened to me. Let me tell you a little story. In one of my past job searches, a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn with a message that, while it didn't seem like spam, it was very generic. I couldn't really tell based on the company's website what they did, but in one 30-minute recruiter call, my attitude went from, "Who the hell are you?" to, "Oh my gosh, this job and job content is perfect for what I want to do in my next role." I ended up joining, and to this day, it's the best team I've ever been on. Here is a screenshot of a weekly team meeting where half the team brought their cats. Take random interviews. Tip number 7 is figure out your calendar. Know your daily or weekly capacity for interviews. And then, and this is the hard part, do not go over it. Your daily and weekly capacity will be different than the next person. Also, figure out how early or late you're willing to take interviews. And again, this is different for different people, right? I know that I won't give the best interviews before 10 a.m. I'm not a morning person. And with rare exception, I won't interview past 5:30. Again, going back to those healthy boundaries between work and not work, right? This does not mean I should do this thing here, which is, oh yeah, my interview capacity is like 6 hour-long interviews a day. If there's a 15-minute break in between, not just because I will be burnt out by this after a couple of days, but what have I forgotten? Lunch. When am I going to eat? Also, you're going to be scheduling a lot of interviews, and you want to avoid a lot of wasted back and forth time with scheduling interviews, doing scheduled Tetris. So get a tool like a Calendly and sync it to your calendar of choice, whether it be like Gmail, Outlook, if you're still using Yahoo. It syncs with damn near everything. Calendly allows other people to see when you're available to interview and schedule time themselves with you. And you don't have to share your entire calendar willy-nilly. Recruiters use this all the time. You can do it too. Plus, it can pad your calendar so that you have a minimum time between meetings to help maintain an interview schedule that won't burn you out. Tip number 8, you're going to be asked a lot of the same questions in interviews, so make sure to have your shticks ready for those most common questions. Just like you want the code you write to be reusable and less buggy over time, you want your shticks to be reusable pieces of information that you practice and improve over time. The two most generic types of shticks are elevator pitch shticks or job responsibility shticks. So elevator pitch shticks are, tell me about yourself. What are you looking for in your next role? Job responsibility shticks are things like, tell me about your most recent role, or things like, why did you leave? As an iOS dev specifically, you're going to be doing a lot of talking shop. If you're any sort of domain specific knowledge expert, whether it be iOS or Android or Node or whatever, you're going to be doing a lot of talking shop to evaluate your domain specific knowledge. Now, if you're an iOS developer, you can give iOS interview questions a good Google search. But here are some topics that, in my experience, are asked the most, right? If you're interviewing for a specific platform, Google, insert platform here, interview questions, right? And make sure you're comfortable talking about them. The key here with these types of sort of talking shop shticks is to remember to talk with your interviewer like they're your peer, not like it's a quiz, because if all goes well, they will be your peer. And if you give them a good sense of what it's like, that'll be an incredibly positive signal. And you know what? If you flub an explanation or you get asked about something you know nothing about, make sure to do your homework after the interview and make sure you have a solid answer for next time. Now, if you make it to the final round interview, you'll likely encounter the behavioral interview. Some people call it different things. I know Google calls it like the googliness interview, but this is questions like, tell me about a project you're super proud of. Tell me about a time that you had a disagreement with a coworker. And these are kind of the hardest shticks, because while you may be the most sort of well-rehearsed at explaining a project, your job is to not explain that project. Your job is to answer their questions. So you need to adapt your shticks to fit the question, not the other way around. Don't put a round peg into a square hole. Now, if you Google behavioral interview study guide, you'll likely encounter the STAR method. This is basically the framework for developing behavioral interview shticks. So STAR, situation, task, action, results. Situation, start off with setting the scene or describing the environment. Task, what was your objective? Action, what did you actually do? And result, what happened because of that action? What were the ramifications and the sort of end result? Luckily, a lot of the most common behavioral interview questions are Googleable. So chances are you won't be hit with too many questions that are out of left field. Now, if you have a shtick that you absolutely do not want to forget, or even just a framework you don't want to forget, there's nothing wrong with putting a little Post-it note on your monitor or having a text file open next to your Zoom window. This is almost like creating an archive of your knowledge for use later. So for example, I know that my weakest interview is the system design or architecture interview. So every time I have one of those interviews, I put this little Post-it note on my monitor to remind me to include certain things. Tip number 9, and this is the bad news. You may get some leak code style coding interviews where you have to code in a browser, and this type of interview tends towards a CSE flavor. So you are going to have to learn some data structures and algorithms. It's not out of the ordinary to be asked the time complexity of a solution. So you will have to know big O notation, and damn near every job search, maybe not every company, but in every job search in recent memory has involved the use of linked lists and trees. This is sort of the bane of iOS developers' existence, right? And I'm assuming Android developers as well, because we are domain-specific experts, right? Our expertise is in the platform, not in like, you know, red-black trees or like how to implement like crazy specific optimizations of algorithms. But the good news is, if you are an iOS developer, an Android developer, this is all way less than you think, right? You're not going to have to implement quicksort or know what a red-black tree is. Most browser or leak code style coding interviews that I've done for iOS roles, even super senior ones, just involve manipulation of arrays, dictionaries, and strings, right? And if it's an iOS interview, you get to use Swift, right? And can take advantage of Swift features like default function arguments, map and filter, enums with associated values, etc. Chances are, if you're an Android developer, you're probably going to be able to use Kotlin and you don't have to use Java. Although you can use Java if that's what you're feeling. But definitely take advantage of those language features, right? Big O cheat sheet is a really great, quick and dirty guide that I like to use for studying data structures and algorithms. It has links to appropriate Wikipedia pages for more in-depth learning. And honestly, like, I might just happen to leave it open during interviews to reference it. Tip number 10, open your IDE, whether it's Xcode or Android Studio, before every coding interview, every single one. Even when you get a browser coding interview like a LeetCode or HackerRank or CoderPad interview, have a blank Swift playground open in the background or a quick little Android app. This is a nice safety net just in case the browser, like IDE, if you can even call it IDE, breaks, and you can look really, really good and really, really slick by having a backup. Or if the IDE breaks, like autocomplete, right? Or it doesn't have any autocomplete, just let your interviewer know, hey, I'm just going to pop this code into a Swift playground real quick and like check if there's a fix-it so I can figure out whether it's the CoderPad or whether it's just me, right? And the same goes for Googling syntax. Hey, give me a sec. I'm just going to give a quick Google to whether the filter method filters items in or out. Just give me like 5 seconds. The point of these interviews, right? That works for like any other method. The point of these interviews is to solve the problem, not to test whether you have perfect Swift syntax or Kotlin syntax, right? Because it's okay to ask to like do a one-off Google for like a little bit of a syntax issue. If you're lucky enough to get an interview that's in Xcode or in Android Studio, create the project ahead of time and have it open from the start and build and run it in the iOS simulator or Android emulator. That way, you know your IDE hasn't accidentally updated in the background, nuked all of your simulators, and now it's going to take extra time for everything to open up, right? Plus, now you won't have to worry about where you're putting the project or worse, like have your interviewer see parts of your file system that they weren't supposed to see. But ultimately, it will save you time. So tip number 11 is set healthy interview boundaries. Now that you've got some interviews, beyond just good calendaring, it's important to set healthy interview boundaries. It is okay to take phone interviews outside. This is my absolute favorite way to take interviews. If you have an interview that doesn't require you to be at a computer, you don't have to take it at your desk. Take a walk, go outside, like touch grass, and get some sunlight. It's totally okay to reschedule an interview, even at the last minute. Family emergencies happen. People get sick. This is normal. It's generally a good idea to reschedule as soon as you can, but shit happens and everyone's gone through this. It's okay to ask to run to the bathroom or get water. This is especially the case in long, multi-hour final round interviews. Everybody poops. You'll do worse in an interview if you're holding it in. It's okay to not respond to emails immediately or any communications immediately. Like, this goes back to being on the clock and off the clock. You didn't agree to a 5-minute SLA response time to emails. And you know what? If someone from one of those companies that you're interviewing with calls you out of the blue at a bad time, either pick up and say it's a bad time or let them leave a voicemail. That's okay. It's okay to have a hard stop time. Other people have meetings, and so do you, right? Your interviewer might have a hard stop time, and so can you. Even if that meeting is watching Ted Lasso, the new season, which all of you should watch. Like, whatever, your interviewer doesn't have to know. Make sure that if you do have a hard stop time, say that at the start of the interview, right? Just to set expectations. It's okay to do that. It's okay to ask to schedule final round interviews across multiple days. If your interview endurance means you don't do well with a 4-hour contiguous interview block, ask to split it. A lot of companies do that by default anyway, right? Whether it be for scheduling reasons or just their own interviewers' endurance. It's okay to stop an interview if you know it's not for you. Be respectful of people's time by not wasting it. During my most recent search, I ended a call after not even 5 minutes because I found out they were an all React Native house, and that's just not what I'm searching for. Tip number 12 is, once you get feedback from results from interviewers, know what they mean. You're going to inevitably get some rejection emails. It's important to understand what they mean. The most obvious thing is to get feedback. If you go all the way through to the final round of interviews, you'll likely have spent at least 5 to 6 hours with people from that company. And if you spend that long with that company, chances are they'll give you feedback on your interviews if you ask. Not everyone, but it's important to know that if it was on you, why they turned you down, where you can improve. Interviews measure your ability to interview that one time. Most interviews test your ability to interview, not your ability to do the job. There's only a handful of interviews where I've been like, wow, that was a really good assessment of my skills as an engineer. But not only that, they measure how you did that one time, right? And you do what you can to ensure your performance improves on average over time. But sometimes, you know what? Stuff happens and you don't perform your best in an interview, right? This goes back to, no, you don't suck. You're not a bad engineer, right? Interviews measure your ability to interview that one time. But sometimes the reverse happens and you absolutely nail it, but for some reason, you didn't get it. Sometimes stuff happens that's completely out of your control. Sometimes someone gets through the interview process before you, and they accept before the company has a chance to extend an offer. Sometimes there's a hiring freeze, and they like you, but from high up in the company, they're like, we're not hiring engineers anymore. Or we're not hiring for this role anymore. Sometimes prioritization happens and they close the role. Sometimes an internal transfer will take that role. And the best you can do is to get volume, get application volume, so that you have other choices. The last tip is, when you do get a job offer, first you celebrate, but then you always negotiate. States like New York and Colorado now require companies to provide salary ranges for job listings. And so this is becoming so much easier to see where your offer falls. Companies are not people. And you should feel absolutely zero guilt about asking to take more of their money, because people that may or may not be as talented as you are asking for more money, and they are getting it, and you deserve that too. I'm going to leave you with a reality check as someone that just went through this not a few months ago. The job market sucks right now, and there's no sugarcoating it. Like, trust me, I know this firsthand. Job searching is hard. Job searching when you don't have a job is stressful, and the current job market makes everything worse. But luck favors the prepared, and the best thing you can do is approach it in a healthy way that maximizes your efforts and minimizes burnout. Thanks so much. Question time?
Thank you so much, Larry. That was super, super helpful.
Awesome. I'm gonna stop the share so I can look at the chat.
We have a couple of questions.
Wow. All right, let's see. I want to scroll through. Let's see. Oh no, someone was a contractor, so no severance pay. Let's see. Do you want to facilitate the Q&A, or do you want me to like pick my favorites?
You can pick your favorites, and I also can read others that we have.
Yeah, let's see. Random feelings generator, love it put this way. Yes. I've been searching for remote jobs, but have to consider any job now since unemployment. Ooh, Antoinette, one of the things that you can definitely do is see if in-person jobs would be open to remote, right? I know that sometimes details of certain job postings are just sort of more generic, right? And sometimes, oops, we forgot to mark this one as hybrid, or forgot to mark this one as remote. Let's see. It's a breakup. Sometimes, you know what? Yes, getting laid off does feel like a breakup. Let's see. We have a group on Slack. Yep, awesome. Job searching is a full-time job. Nice. You might find a hidden gem. Okay. You'll do worse in an email if you're holding it in. All right. Let me pull up this Q&A. Okay. What are some ways one can be supportive to a friend or acquaintance who has recently been laid off? Oh, this is a fantastic question. Let's see. I think knowing someone, knowing whether they want to be sort of have alone time or whether they want people time, right? I'm the type of person that I'm the most extroverted extrovert that ever did extrovert. You can probably tell this for about 5 seconds in. I like being around people, saying, hey, if you ever want to co-work, I'm here, let's do it. Or just, hey, send someone like a little care package. Whatever you do, don't hound them with those questions. Like, oh, how's it going? Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, don't unduly put their mind at like towards those layoffs. Really listen. And then if you say you're going to support someone, like if you need anything from me and they ask something from you, make sure you're there, right? Don't like offer something that you can't provide, right? Be there. Let's see. What are some ways to have a contingency plan or prep ahead before being laid off? Okay. A couple of things. Number one, if there are resources that you need, like performance, like evaluations, performance reviews, that include things like stuff your coworkers have said about you, like get those off your laptop, right? If there are, let's see, if you are at an in-person job, and you're thinking, oh, the layoff's definitely going to happen tomorrow, go in and take some snacks. Like, this is just like a little itty bitty thing that'll make you feel better. Like, oh, you know what? At least now I have food in the house, right? If there is stuff that is at your desk, like your company will absolutely not prioritize returning your stuff to you. Like they kind of have to, but it can take months, right? Do not worry about giving your company's stuff back, right? Prioritize what you need. Don't prioritize, oh, I'm gonna have to like ship them back. You know what? They will send for it, right? Absolutely, right? Thank you for doing this. I'm doing overseas job search in my search. Do you happen to have any advice or knowledge regarding looking for jobs outside of the US? I don't. And I don't have any advice with like international employment law. I know that a lot of remote jobs are specific to a country, but if you know that there are remote people in your given country that work for that company, talk to the recruiter, see if they'll make an exception, see if they'll open up a special, like say if you're in Spain, right, and the job is like remote US, see if they have people in Spain, see if they will open up a new like rec for Spain, because you know operating a multinational company has like weird employment weirdnesses. Any tips for how to negotiate pay when being offered a job? I wouldn't want to risk the offer being rescinded. I have never heard of anyone getting an offer rescinded because they tried to negotiate. That's not to say that it can't happen. I think that a quick 5-minute call, I'll say I'm not a salary negotiation expert, but I will say in my experience, a quick 5-minute call where you are like the nicest human being to your recruiter, or like a quick email where you're super, super nice to a recruiter. You can be firm and also nice. They are not the antithesis of each other, but like sending a quick email or a 5-minute conversation has gotten me several thousands of dollars multiple times. If you want, you know what? I'm not Mr. Woo AI woo, but like, hey, you know what? Pop an email into ChatGPT and have it rewrite it for you, right? I think there are people whose job it is to do salary negotiation emails or salary negotiation calls. Do that. This is my favorite question. What do you think about going through a staffing or employment agency to help find a position? Oh man. I try not to be very prescriptive about stuff because different strokes for different folks, but I do not like going through professional headhunters. And I'll tell you why. Number one, you always have to go through an intermediary, right? They have to sort of get involved. Their loyalty is to that staffing agency, right? If you talk with a recruiter from a given company that you're applying to, their loyalty or their job is to make sure that the right person gets the job, right? And so oftentimes the professional headhunter won't really be technical and won't really know, and a lot of times they'll just like call you out of the blue, like unprofessionally at like random times, because their job is to just get volume. Their job is to just like, oh, we referred a bunch of people, and not really trying to find you the right position. I don't like going through professional headhunters. That being said, there is a way that you can do it well, and it is to ask the headhunter, what's the name of the company that when they cold email you, hey, what's the name of the company? I want to make sure that I haven't talked to them already. And then just go freaking apply to the company, right? You haven't signed any exclusivity agreement. Go apply to the company, right? So that's thing number one. Thing number two is on LinkedIn, I prefixed my name with an emoji so that I know whether someone is using like an auto mailer, right, to reach out to me. So if it says like emoji Zach, I know it's an auto mailer. And if it says Zach or Zachary, like, then I know that they've actually like reached out to me. I think staffing / employment agency people are no bueno. That being said, or rather not for me, I should say. I have several other friends that like disagree, but I've been burned so many times by people lowballing offers, being like, oh, but you got all the way through, and the number that we said we were going to give you is not. I got lowballed by like 30 grand, and then another one just like called me on the phone while I was at work. Don't do that. I do like hired.com. Hired.com, I think is one of the few like job aggregator sort of like, it's not quite a staffing agency, but it is it's a platform to sort of get rid of some of the annoying communications. They are companies reach out with the salary that they want to offer you. So like that's the thing that they're going to offer you if you go through. But you can still negotiate. Okay, I've rambled on about this one because I could talk hours and hours about professional headhunters. But TLDR, just go apply to the companies, right? The chances are the recruiters of the actual companies are better than the professional headhunters. Yes, Vui, that was a picture of me with Craig Federici. The one time I went to WWDC, it was the WWDC Bash. Bastille was playing, and people really wanted to take pictures with Craig, then listen to like a very, very like chart-topping artist play. They're like, all right, cool, I'm on my phone. And then like Craig comes up and everyone's like, it's Craig. Yeah, let's see. Any feedback on looking for early signs when a layoff is about to happen, except for learning it from rumors? Nope. That's really it. Like, keep your ear to the ground about layoffs. There is this like festering cesspool of a website called blind.com. If you're at like a big tech company, you kind of have to be on it in terms of like knowing what the real tea is, and if you want to get like the hot gossip. But it's also filled with just the worst trolley content that you have to sift through. If it wasn't for Blind, people wouldn't have known about the layoffs. People wouldn't have known about, like, it got leaked, like the full process of certain companies' layoffs, like when it was going to happen, who was told and when, and in some cases of certain layoffs, how it was decided, like how it was decided, like who got laid off and whatnot. Let's see. Okay, we got more stuff. How to feel comfortable and handle layoff questions in future interviews. Great question. Getting laid off is not a blemish on a record, right? Getting laid off is different than getting fired. You can also lie. You can just say, hey, you know what? I just left because it wasn't good for me, right? If you got fired, just say, like, it wasn't a match for me. If you got laid off, you can totally say you got laid off, right? Because chances are it's not skill related, right? And if you're like, in my case, like an ex-Facebook employee, everyone was just like clamoring for, oh my God, big land grab for, these ex-big tech employees. So I don't think it's like a necessarily a source of shame, more as like a source of like inconvenience, right? Like, crap, I need to pay the bills, right? Yeah, awesome. Any last questions? Any additional resources?
More.
Oh yeah.
Yes. But those are not in the chat. So.
Ooh, okay.
should I apply even if the position require more experience than what I have at the moment?
Absolutely, right? If it will take you 5 seconds, the worst they'll say is no in an automated way. Like, don't, companies are not people, and you should not, you should do your best to not sort of put your eggs in one basket, right? Or be like emotionally invested in a company, because realistically, especially if it's a big company, your experience will greatly differ team to team, right? If it's a startup, like, it's a little bit harder to do that because you can, like, in many cases, know everyone that works with the company. Yeah, just why not? It takes 30 seconds, right? Oftentimes job postings will be generic and maybe 4 to 6 years of iOS development experience. And if you have 3, fucking do it. Like, what's the worst that'll happen?
And the last one, do you have any recommendations for people who do not receive severance pay?
Know the terms of the WARN Act. Make sure you find other people that have been laid off from that company, right? Whether it's especially in terms of filing for unemployment, especially in the US. It varies state by state, and luckily the WARN Act is a little bit of a safety net. But make sure that you get what you're owed, especially if you have a company that doesn't do unlimited PTO, you are owed your PTO.
Okay, thank you so much, Zach.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Do you have any social media that you want to share? You can share also more questions in case there are more questions on Slack, and also contact Zach in case you want to share more and asking more questions.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only sort of like professional social media that I use in terms of like iOS developer community is Twitter. I basically only have iOS developer content on Twitter. And so I must be the only person in the world with like a reasonably healthy Twitter feed. So DM me on Twitter. I absolutely am. I'm more than happy to answer additional questions. If you're like, I didn't want to really like post this on the record or whatever, feel free to DM me. I'm at ZH Here, I'll pop. There we go. Thanks, Navati.
Well, thank you very much. We're on time, and feel free to reach out and ask more questions in case you have more. And thank you, Zach, again. This conference was really, really helpful for both of us. We ended up learning so much things and more resources that we can have in case this happens, or how to support others also. So thank you very much again, and see you on the next session.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for coming.